when your business comes to you and say, hey, let's do V2, you might have this reaction, which is not great. So in this talk, I want to give you a few tips and tricks so that if it happens to you, you won't be like this guy. So this is the initial situation, right? Like you've got an upstream and you've got a couple of endpoints, right? Wow. Germany has changed a lot. Late and quiet. What happened? Okay, of course there was a trick. Probably you all lied. This is the initial situation. You never expose your APIs directly over the internet. It's super unsafe. So you have a reverse proxy, right? And now you are super careful. Well, there is a trick again. And my solution is very simple. You have a reverse proxy. You make it an API gateway, and all your problems are solved. 3 minutes. Thanks. Shortest talk in my life. Questions? How? Yeah, okay. So, of course, the devil is in the detail. So, the biggest problem is what is an API gateway compared to a reverse proxy? And to answer that question, I need to dive a bit into history. So, you might have noticed that I have gray hair, which means I'm quite old, experienced. At least I still have my hair compared to the guy here. And so I started to use the web before 2000. Were you born? 89. Barely. The thing is, with time passing, I will have more and more time saying, yeah, I was not born. So I did my first website in HTML. We already had images. I know who has started creating their own website without images. I know a few people. Yeah. So when I started, we already had images. That was very nice. Also, we could put at the root of the website a MIDI file. And when you... Who did it? It sucked, right? But we did it anyway because we could. So everybody who knew about that crap did it. There was no CSS, so to design your button, the border of your buttons, you use tables. Yeah, semantic web for the win. And is there any JavaScript developer? Okay, so I won't comment whether this is good or bad, but we had no JavaScript at the time. And I used something called Hotdog Pro to do that, which was the best stuff that happened at the time. You could actually click on a button and it would open the tag for you, and then you had to click on the button to close it as well. That was the height of WYSIWYG at the time. Then came Dreamweaver and it made everything better, but that was a good thing. And of course, no YouTube video to teach you how to do that. You had to actually check the source of the site you wanted to copy. Anyway, yeah. At the time, I didn't think about it. That was magical. I just put my files on some folder, but there was a web server, right? And though I would love to think it was Apache, I think it was Microsoft IIS. And everything was fine, man. The server was meant to serve static file, and it served static file. But people wanted more. Like, somebody wanted to have the date and the time inside of the page. Again, completely useless because you had it on your computer anyway, but we wanted it anyway. Something more useful, instead of having to update manually the last updated timestamp, you wanted to have that computed for you and displayed to the user automatically. And for that, we needed something else than static files. We wanted to generate the file dynamically. And of course, there was Perl and CGI, but the thing is, I'm not, and I was not even at the time, a Perl developer. And I would have to learn about Perl. At the time of the design of the page, that was more or less okay, but for maintenance, that's crap. Because you have to understand the code and to actually do the same as a server in your head. I mean, if you are a Java developer, you know that's why we invented GSPs instead of servlets. And GSPs were actually inspired by PHP. The idea, the genius idea of the guy who came up with PHP, which means personal homepage, and that's true. They changed the meaning because it looked not super professional, but it means personal homepage. And now it's super cool, like, hey, hypertext preprocessor, but at the time, I kid you not, personal homepage. So it was an Apache module at the time. The genius idea was just write HTML and insert some tags where you want the dynamic data. That was genius. But we didn't stop there, because after a while, companies, businesses, wanted to use this channel, this new crazy channel, to communicate. They wanted to open another channel of communication to their customers or their prospects. And if you, as a developer, your website goes down, that's not a big issue. Well, you can reset your uptime to 0. That's a big drain on your ego, but otherwise, nobody cares. If a company has their website going down, that's a problem of image. And so now we have to add a new layer of web server that don't serve anything, that are just there to load balance between nodes. And if one node is down, it's removed from the pool. So now we have something that is more resilient. But it doesn't stop there. Because when organizations realize, hey, it really works, now everybody wanted their own website, but not only website, they wanted an intranet, they wanted an extranet, they wanted a whatever net. And so the nodes that previously were all the same, because there was only one site, were different. And now this first layer of web server that served nothing actually had to do routing. And that's the story of the web server, my friends. It served static content, then dynamic content, then load balancing, then routing. And those two last points, it's not web serving anymore. We used a real reverse proxy. The web server became a reverse proxy. Because once, as an architect, you have this kind of architecture, then it's very easy to push onto the single entry point a lot of cross-cutting concerns. Rate limiting, IP blocking, whatever. And in parallel, we wanted to exchange data with other organizations. So again, at the beginning, we just put an FTP server, you send a file, on the other side there was a job that ran twice a day, perhaps every day, read the file, did the job, renamed the file to done, but it's asynchronous. And we want integration, I wouldn't say at the speed of light, but fast. The problem is when you need to send data to another organization, there is a high chance they have another stack as yours. So the lowest common brick is HTTP. And that was the birth of the HTTP APIs. And so that's how I define the API gateway. It's a reverse proxy. It should be able to do everything a reverse proxy is able to do, but more. For example, I mentioned rate limiting. Every reverse proxy has rate limiting because you want to protect your upstream from being DDoSed. the thing is, you cannot, in the realm of APIs, treat all your clients the same. Rate limiting, by default, is a technical concern. You want to protect your APIs from being DDoSed. Good. But now you offer APIs, and probably some of your clients are willing to give you money to have a higher rate. And then you start your sales saying, oh, we can monetize that. And that's a good idea. And now your reverse proxy needs to distinguish between the clients and apply different rate limitings. And that's the problem. It's business logic. And reverse proxy were not designed at a time where it was a good or even an acceptable thing to put business logic, because again, it's a technical component. So my definition of reverse proxy is like, of API gateway is a reverse proxy that is not unfriendly to business logic. It doesn't mean you should put all your business logic in the reverse proxy, but you should be able to. And also something very important, you can change the configuration and hot reload it. Has anybody used Nginx? Nginx open source? Yeah. If you want to change the configuration, what do? Yeah, you need to switch it off and on again. The Nginx Plus has the hot reload function, but otherwise no. So here are a couple of API gateways on the market. I've only mentioned, well, it's not exhaustive, and then I only mentioned the one you can install on-premise. I myself are working on the Apache APISIX project. As the name implies, it's an Apache project, but there are others. In my demo, I will use Apache APISIX, but I hope that you can use the one you like the most. Just 2 slides on Apache APISIX, so you know where it comes from. It's an Apache project. It was given to the Apache Foundation. After 1 year, it became a top-level project. You know how it works. First, you are in the incubator. Then you need to uphold a couple of requirements, and one of them is you need to have committers from different companies, so there is not one single company behind the project. And afterwards, you can graduate to be a top-level project, which is our case. It's based on Nginx because it works really, really well. The problem is, again, you want to change the configuration in real time. Then you need something else. And for that, there is a component called OpenResty, which is a Lua engine that works on top of Nginx that allows you to do that. The problem is that the configuration of OpenResty maps nearly one-to-one the configuration of Nginx. So it's really hard to read and hard to maintain. So for that, we have more structure. APISIX allows you to use some abstractions, such as what is a route, what is a service, what is an upstream, and everything is plugin based. So back to my initial point, use an API gateway and everything will be fine. And now I've talked a lot and I want to show you some demo, and now for whatever reason I don't have mirroring, so I need to put mirror again. I'm sorry for that, I prepared, but for whatever reason it's not like this. Oh, and it works, it's amazing. No flickering. Tell me if there is a flicker, but normally there shouldn't be. Okay, so I will start the stuff and I will describe afterwards. Clear, Docker, Compose. I'm in the right project, right? Yeah, Evolve API. Okay, so first thing first, everybody is at least familiar with Docker Compose. I declare everything in one file because it's so much easier. No need for Kubernetes and all the complexity. So first I declare Apache APISIX. Great. Apache APISIX by default stores its configuration in etcd. etcd, which is a distributed key value store, the same one used by Kubernetes. So I've also one etcd. Of course, in production, you shouldn't have one single etcd node. You should have it at least 3 and an odd number. But anyway, I want to show you also how you can monitor it. So I have Prometheus in Grafana. And finally, I have my old API and my new API. And because you are mostly Java or at least JVM developers, I can show you the source code. So I have this old API that is a Spring Boot project, and it's really nice. It allows me to do crazy stuff. So here I have my controller with many annotations. I have my application with one more annotation, and look, lo and behold, I can curl, local host 8081, I hope it's 8081, /hello, and it's hello world. Amazing. I'm still a very good developer. And this is my new API, and because I want everybody to love Kotlin, I've created the same hello world in Kotlin, and look, it looks much better already. Good. So I want to migrate from the first version, which is in Java with annotation, to the second version, which is in Kotlin with only one single annotation. The rest is all DSL. Okay, I've started my API gateway. So I try the API gateway, and I will say hello as well. Hello. And because it's a brand new instance, it's not configured. So the first thing that I need to do is to configure it. So how do we configure it? Well, with Apache APISIX, it's quite easy. There is an API for that. We configure the API gateway with an API. So I will run it, and then I will explain it to you. So I have a dedicated route. It's a put. I set its ID. First thing first, I have a dedicated port for admin API, so you don't need to expose it to the outside world. Right? It's pretty good idea. And to be even more secure, I have an API key. There are other ways to secure it. Here, I'm using the default API key, which is pretty stupid. You shouldn't do that in production, but it's just a demo. Somebody used the default API key. Yeah, I know. It happens in every talk. Don't worry, nobody will tell you. And I send the data. The name is optional, and then I have URI and potentially methods. If I don't specify the method, it matches all the methods. And here I have URI and methods. And if I receive a request that matches both, then I will forward the request to this upstream. Upstream is made of several nodes. Here, again, it's a demo. I have a single one. So normally, you should have several. In production, probably you have service discovery. You don't say, hey, I want to forward to this service. Probably there is a service registration somewhere. But again, this is a demo. And I want everything to be monitored by Prometheus. And as I mentioned before, it's a plugin. So now if I've already run this, so now if I do it again, oh, hello world, hey, I'm back to square one. Amazing. But now I can start working. So let's start working. I want to version, oh no. Oh no. Kalispera, Dimitri. Yes. Yasas. Do you know Dimitri? Round of applause for Dimitri. He makes the best pictures in the world. No, back to being serious. I want to start to version my API. There are actually 3 ways to do that. The first is the parse. That's the one I will use it because it's, no, now I see you. Now I'm unfocused now. That's the easiest way. It's the parse. That's the one I will use because it's super visible. The other way is through a header. So you can either use a custom header or use the content type stuff with a VND plus whatever. It also works. And every site tells you, hey, you can also use query parameters, but I've never seen it for real. So you can use it, but Apache APISIX uses all the 3. So I will use the parse again, but you can use whatever you want. And no. Now I understand. It gets back every time it gets back to this. Now I will have an issue if it continues because as you saw, I configure it. So now it should stop doing that. Okay. So as I mentioned previously, I can have abstraction, and it's better to use abstractions because I can reuse them. So here I have another endpoint called upstream. I can put it. And what was embedded before, I can create it for real. So now I have a dedicated upstream. The second thing I want to do is I, in the first route, created a Prometheus plugin. Now, for every route, I need to remember, oh, I want to monitor it, so I will use the Prometheus plugin. I can bet you anything that at some point somebody will forget, and that's exactly the route that you will need to monitor. So I want to have something by default, and that's called plugin global rule. Sorry. Here I say global rule, and by default, every route will have plugin Prometheus. And finally, I can create my version route. So here, I create my route number 2. It's also a put. I use the upstream ID that I created before, I reference it, but I need to do something before. And the thing I need to do before is, since I'm using path-based, I receive v1/hello, and if I forward v1/hello, what will happen? 404, so I need to remove the v1. And again, everything is a plugin, so I can rewrite the request before I forward it, and here I say, I have v1 whatever, and I just keep whatever. So normally, it still works. I won't put myself in like full screen because I know the trick now. Now I have 2 routes. One of them version, one of them unversion. So first, developers won't migrate because we are a lazy bunch, and I don't want that. And second, there is a chance, probably 50-50, that new developers will use the unversion route. So we need to stop that. We need to tell people, stop using our route. But we don't know them, because when we offered our API, we didn't want to have any friction with our users. You didn't want to make them register, so as of now, we don't know how to contact them to tell them we will change something. So we need to rely on our friend, the HTTP 301 status. So we need to say, if you use the version route, just use the other route. Guess what? There is a plugin for that. So route number 1, we can patch it with a plugin, a new plugin called redirect. And now there are 2 solutions. The first solution is, well, you are doing your usual job and it doesn't work anymore. So that's also a good lesson. If you are a consumer of APIs, you should also monitor their usage, not only if you are a provider. But you can tell me, hey, Nicolas, I'm very, very smart and I do auto redirect. Who is very, very smart here? Everybody, right? You are all developers. Yeah, but now you have doubled the number of requests. You have doubled your cloud bill. So again, even if you are very, very smart, just like monitor your usage, please. Okay, so my problem is I don't know who is using it, who is using my API. So we fixed it however we could. But now is perhaps the time to make people register. Who here likes to register their email address so they can be spammed? You? No, nobody wants it. But who likes free stuff? Okay, so if you put your marketer hat, you can say, okay, you can keep using our API, but if you don't register, that's a burden for us, so we will rate limit you. And if you give out your email, then it's fine. You will be unlimited. Oh, that's a good incentive. That's free stuff. So you might agree for that. A couple of people might not agree. That's fine. They will be rate limited. But the others, now we can contact them when we change something. How do we do that? Through a plugin. The problem is there is no out-of-the-box plugin for that. So what did I do as a developer? I copy-pasted the rate-limiting plugin. And I did my own logic. How do you do that? Well, I'm not sure it's very interesting. It's in Lua. Who knows Lua? Okay, too many people, I won't show you the codes. Because I'm not a Lua developer. I I just added 10 lines of logic saying, hey, if you are authenticated, then bypass the rest of the logic. And the rest of the configuration is the same. So I can run that. And now if I v1 slash, I'm rate limited. Good. Okay, how do you register people? It depends in your context. It depends. I don't care. What I will be using in this demo is simple. I will be managing the consumers. That's how we call them inside of Apache APISIX. So I will create a consumer, and it will be, so hey, a new route. No? Consumers, I put a new consumer. Its username will be John Doe. And this means the key auth plugin means if I have an HTTP header named API key, which value is my key, I will be authenticated as John Doe. And in the plugin code, wherever I'm authenticated, I bypass the limitation. So I can create this one. And I can say, hey, API key, key, my key. It works. Amazing. So now, people who registered, they have unlimited usage. This is what we wanted. I have a bit of time, perhaps. Oh, yeah, I forgot. You can ask me the questions there, and I will check at the end. Yeah, now might be a good time to take it. Otherwise, it's 7, the room number 7. I can show you the dashboard. So we have a dashboard. And of course, the password is not admin. Again, change it in production. And here we can see our 2 routes. Here we can see the upstream that I created explicitly. Here we can see our John Doe receiver. And here, for example, I can change something. I can view the JSON that is stored directly in etcd. And for example, I can change here to directly, and it will reflect here. No? So if you have business user, you can always show them the dashboard. Yeah, for most of our usage here, we'll probably be happier with the command line. Okay, that's pretty good. Now we are nearing our deployment time. So what do you do before deployment? Yeah, I heard it. Sorry? Pray, yeah. That's not very engineering-like, but yeah, it depends. I don't believe, but up to you. What do you do? Yeah, test. You are testing. Great. So who here is unit testing? Yeah. Integration testing? Yeah. Testing in production? This sounds like a joke, and of course it's funny, but that's not completely untrue. Because whatever your test harness in unit testing, whatever your integration tests are, you are only testing like a sample. And especially in the realm of APIs, you don't know all the options, all the payloads that the consumer will send you. There is a high chance there is something that you didn't test. And that's expected. That's OK. So in general, we do Canary release for that. But if you are a bit more afraid, like I am, like I prefer to say I have very good risk management skills, you prefer to be a bit smarter before doing Canary release. What we can do is we can duplicate the load at the API gateway level, send it to both the v1 and the v2, check the HTTP status, for example, and discard the v2 result. And if we monitor both, then I will show you the dashboard. Normally, it should be more scientific. If they have the same like curve, then it's a pretty good sign. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's, again, there is a plugin for that. And here, okay, I have 5 minutes of ego boost. I'm very proud of this code. And the reason for that is when I I started to work on the product, this didn't work. Every plugin has a priority, and the priority is hard-coded. And this way, Apache APISIX knows in which order it applies the plugin, which makes sense. And it's hard-coded because, well, you can't have every combination possible. So that's a good default. The problem here is if it's hard-coded, the proxy mirror runs before the proxy rewrite. So it means first, it sends v1/hello to the v2, and it removes the v1 and sends it to the v1, which is not great. So through my, let's say, human skills, I was able to convince my colleague that it was a great idea. You could override the priority. Now it's on you if you do something crazy, right? But now I was able to set a higher priority to the proxy rewrite. So first, when it receives the request, v1/hello, it removes the v1 prefix, and then it sends hello to v1 and v2. And it's really good. And now we can do it, and I can do it several times, and it's super boring. So let's say hello JCON, because it also works like this. Amazing. Told you I was super great developer. But I'm not able to use a simple for loop in Bash, so. Yeah, who cares? Yeah, I mean, I'm just a developer advocate. So, now I can go to Prometheus, and I can check the results. To Grafana, sorry. So I'm using the default Grafana dashboards. The only thing that I did is I added 2 widgets. And for people who have done that before, you know how bad that is. So normally here you should have, of course, the scale is not the same. It is the same for whatever reason. But they should look the same, right? You have the green stuff that looks like this and the yellow stuff that goes like this. So normally, again, you should do proper engineering. But here, for the purpose of this talk, I want to show you something which is visual, and that is good enough. So let's pretend everything is good. Now we can go to Canary release. Canary release. So that's what people do when they test in production. They do Canary release, which is what? They send a sample of the users. They send those users to the v2. And if they survive, that they can increase the sample percentage. There are many ways to do Canary release. You can do it by percentage, so you start very small depending on how many users you have. You can start with 1%, then 2%, then 5%, whatever. You can do it by IP, saying, oh, I only want to Canary release to people of this country because they are very nice people, so if something breaks, they won't bitch too much. Don't do it for France. You can do it by header, so you can only have a very specific number of users who you release the header to. It's up to you. Here, I will do something which is for the demo. I will do 50-50. So 50% of the people will be like directed to v1 and 50 to v2, which is a good way to do that. So again, everything is a plugin. So first I need to create the upstream, though now I have 2 upstreams. And I can remove the proxy mirror plugin. So I set it to null and I have the traffic split. And it reads like that. I will have a weight of 1 to the upstream v2 and the update weight of 1 to the other one. So 1 plus 1 equals 2. So 1 over 2 is 50%. Let's do that. And normally I should have 50-50. Now I let you count whether this is 50-50, but when we reach infinity, it will be 50-50. Okay, we can still check that this is working here as well. Perfect. And now, what's the next step? Enjoy life. Not really. We have one last issue. Now we have v1 and v2. Remember, the unversioned is not available anymore. What's next? Probably v3, v4, whatever. And the problem with, if you are a product manager or an engineering manager, you want to avoid to have many versions of the same product, because it means that you will need to dispatch your human resources across all the versions. So 2 versions is already a good thing. So we need a way to somehow deprecate the v1 in order to deliver v3. And for that, unfortunately, I didn't find anything written in stone, but there is an IETF draft. If you are in the world of APIs, I really, really advise you to read IETF drafts or specifications, even better. You can really learn a lot from them, and most of the time they are pretty readable. So I found this IETF draft called deprecation header, and it defines a header named deprecation. The value can be a boolean, which I'd advise you not to, or a date. In the demo, because I'm lazy, I'm using a boolean. Don't do it, don't do it. Now you also have another header, a header called link, that points to the new resource, because you want to, your user to use, it's like in Java, it's deprecated, but you don't know what you should use instead. No, here you are telling them you don't use this endpoint, you use this endpoint. And if you want to be extra nice to your user, you also have a sunset header. So deprecations means at this date you shouldn't use it anymore, and sunset means at this date there shouldn't be anything here anymore. And again, it should be in the future. And if possible, far away, but it doesn't depend on me. So here, how do you do that? Well, that's the easiest one. Sorry, I didn't create the v2 route. I need to deprecate the v1 route. So here, here, where? What did I do? Yeah, I was wondering. It sounded a bit strange. It's just adding headers. The only thing that is interesting here, again, I'm using a boolean, that's not interesting. I'm using nginx variable, so you don't need to hard code your stuff. So it's pretty easy to do that. And now you can, and if I'm using v1 and I'm verbose, you can see it's deprecated, and instead you should use this one, and okay. And now, because I've created the v2 route, no, not here, here, I can use the v2 as expected. And now I'm always using the v2. Great. One last step. Enjoy life. I believe that if you implement all the tips and tricks that I've shown you, the next time your business comes for you and say, hey, we need to develop v3, that will probably be your reaction. The good thing is, of course, it's advisable to do everything that I've shown you here before you deploy your first version or your unversioned version. But the benefit is now if you have an unversioned API, you can use these as an afterthought. It will be a bit, let's say, bumpy, but it's still possible. Great, thanks for your attention. You can follow me on Twitter, because I don't want to call it X. You can follow me on Mastodon or Blue Sky, because I don't know what the next thing will be. If you are interested about the source codes, everything is on GitHub. It's just hidden under a bit.ly link, so I can check how many people are really interested in the codes. And if I got you interested in Apache APISIX, even though the talk was not about Apache APISIX, please have a look. Then my boss can see it, and he can send me here next year again. And now perhaps we have questions, and I will check Slido. How we can we get the Docker compose file and the whole codes? Now you know. How can I make it go away? It's you. You are the one to do that. Make it go away, please. How would you initialize the APISIX server on first startup without using it? That's a very good idea. So it depends. Here I showed you the dynamic configuration of Apache APISIX, which is very good for the demo. However, I wouldn't consider it for real production usage. I would consider using static deployment, meaning you have a static YAML file and you have GitOps. And now all you know that's stateless, you don't have all this kind of crap. It requires a bit more maturity, but that's the way I would do it. And then in this case, then your stuff is already prepared. Sorry, I'm trying to find the mirror display again. I don't know why it works. Do you have to use Lua for plugins, or can we use Java too? That's a very good question. Please don't tell it to my boss, but I would really, really recommend you, even though we have plugins in multiple languages, including Java, that you don't use them. The developer experience is just horrible. No, don't do it. Lua is very simple. However, I could hack something, believe me, it's very simple. However, what I think and what I try to convince, and I think I manage it, I convinced my, my product manager to do, is only support Lua and WebAssembly. And now whatever the language you are using, you will be able to generate WebAssembly. And then for us, it's less trouble, and for you, you can keep using your language. However, still, Lua is for citizen in Apache APISIX, so it's not that bad, believe me. It takes a bit of time to understand, but it's like everything. And fire is probably not a question. I think it's good feedback, but I'm not sure. In general, in Germany, it's like this. But yeah, you are respectful, so I don't know. I don't know what it is. Is it a question? Who asked this question? Ah, okay. Thanks. If you evil enough, you can fail random. Hey, wait. You go too fast. If you evil enough, you can fail random requests to convince your customers to switch. Switch to what? To Lua. Yeah, and that's not a great idea. However, about failing random requests, you can use the API gateway to actually fail some requests, so you can check how resilient either your clients or your other service, if you are using the API gateway between service are. And that's also a good usage of Apache APISIX. We have a plugin for failing on purpose, but randomly, right? I think I answered mostly everything. Yes, I think so, yeah. It's 45. Thanks a lot for your attention. I will be there until tonight. I leave tomorrow, so if you have questions, you are free to come. And I have stickers. Thanks a lot.